Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things firearms, firearms policy, politics, culture, media, you name it. We're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. So please take a moment to like and share the program. Let your friends know. Hey, whether you're watching us on Facebook or you're watching us on YouTube, we want to make sure that you guys get the alerts when we go live. So how you do that is this. You make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, and make sure you click the notification button so that you can get the alerts as soon as we go live. Also, as usual, want to encourage you to go to fpcgear.com. That's fpcgear.com. All sorts of cool pro Second Amendment swag, and every dollar that you spend there goes right back into the fight for our right to keep and bear arms. So you can support the Second Amendment and you can look good doing it. That's fpcgear.com. You know, one of the great things, the great opportunities that I have here hosting this show is the opportunity to get a chance to learn about and meet different people who are involved in the movement for our right to keep and bear arms, to defend that right, to expand that right, and make sure that it's protected here in these United States. And I get to meet people and talk with people on all different fronts. And that's the important thing to understand. A lot of people think, well, it's just one fight. No, it may be one fight, but this fight is being fought on many, many, many different fronts. One of those fronts is a cultural front, right? In other words, there are people, there are different people who look at the Second Amendment, who look at the American experience or the Second Amendment differently, but it's a right that belongs to each and every one of us. And unfortunately, society wants us to believe, well, the Second Amendment isn't really a right; it's a special privilege that is set aside for certain people. And what a lot of people don't want you to realize is that when we talk about, quote unquote, it being a quote unquote special right for special people, there was a time in which largely the Second Amendment wasn't meant for all people. In fact, many of the gun control laws that were put in place were actually put in place in a way in which to keep certain people from owning firearms. And in the 1800s, it was all about all about Native Americans, and then eventually it was about Latinos, Chinese, and African Americans, basically keeping, quote unquote, those people from owning firearms. And so I came across a group, and you guys have probably already heard of them, but I came across a group that is working specifically to help Black people, African American people understand that the Second Amendment does in fact apply to us and help and to apply to all Americans, including Black Americans, but then also how to effectively exercise that right. And so with that, I got a chance to reach out and was able to get a hold of a gentleman named Douglas Jefferson, who is the vice president for the National African American Gun Association, and he's on the show with us today. Douglas, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How you doing today, Craig?
I'm doing fantastic, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Do me a favor and just kind of tell our viewers a little bit about how your organization came to be and why it came to be.
Sure. So our organization was started in 2015 by the current president of our organization, Philip Smith. And the organization, he started it because he got into firearms sort of late in life in his 40s. And he lived in California, born and raised in California, never been around firearms, hadn't been raised in a household with them, and was sort of one of those, oh no, firearms are bad, let me stay away from them. Until one of his coworkers, after much urging, convinced him to come out to the range one day. So went out there, and guess what? He really, really enjoyed himself. So he continued going to the range, but then he noticed, well, there weren't a lot of people that looked like him at the range. And so we started looking around and seeing if there was a group, an organization that specialized in spreading the good word of the Second Amendment out to the African American community, and there wasn't. So that's where he took his inspiration from. And when he moved to Georgia, he started up the National African American Gun Association with our first chapter in Atlanta, Georgia. So we've been rock and rolling since 2015. Now is our fourth year in existence. And we actually celebrate our anniversary this month, February 2019. We went from just a few members and one chapter in Atlanta. Now we've gone to over 70 chapters across 30 states across the nation.
Wow, that's phenomenal. You know, it's interesting. Now, let's just be real clear, and you know, like FP's Firearms Policy Coalition, we're not a conservative organization. In other words, we're not a Republican or a Democrat organization. And I'm assuming the same is true of your organization, right?
Yes, that's correct. So we have African Americans from all walks of life, from upper class, middle class, lower class, folks that are conservative, folks that are liberal, folks that are everywhere in between. And the one thing we all have in common is that we support our Second Amendment rights. We agree that the Second Amendment is a right, it should not be infringed, and that more of us need to be involved with it, especially given the history of our community in this country in general, and then with the Second Amendment in particular, because the Second Amendment has been integral to the African American community getting the civil rights that they have today and maintaining those civil rights. There's a very rich and long history of the Black tradition of arms in this country, of a long history of moral, ethical, and legal gun ownership that just isn't talked about enough. And we wanted to make sure that we educate our community on it and that we educate all communities on that history to see how important we are to that Second Amendment just as much as any other group.
So, you know, it's funny. You know, once again, we actually created a video several years back, and we try to update it every few years with different stuff. But talking about things like the Deacons for Defense, talking about and helping people understand where the language for gun control, where the actual legal language actually came from. And it was all, once again, it was all designed around the idea of keeping, quote unquote, those people from owning
Mm-hmm.
firearms. Now, what do you say to folks who say, well, you know, the Second Amendment it wasn't written for us because we weren't even, I mean, we were 3/5 of a person in the Constitution. What do you say to people who say the Second Amendment wasn't written for us?
Well, the first thing I say is that under that logic, then that would mean none of the Constitution was written for us. And historically, that was true. When the Constitution was written, it was not considering African American people as citizens of this country. But you know what? There were many battles that were fought, and they were long fought, and they were hard fought. And now African Americans are due all the rights and privileges of American citizenship. Now we know that today in practice, that is not necessarily the case. You don't always see those rights respected. But our organization particularly focuses on making sure that that Second Amendment right is embraced by the African American community, number one. And number two, is respected by the African American community and by all communities as well, as a right that is for us, just like any other rights that are in the Constitution for any other American citizen.
E- exactly. Uh, I take the perspective of it may not have been written for me, but guess what? It's mine now. As a citizen
Absolutely.
of these United States, it's mine now, and I'm going to fully embrace it, and I'm going to make sure that I exercise. Just like the house I live in right now, it wasn't built for me, but guess what? It's mine now. I own it now, and I'm going to make sure that my right to continue to own it and utilize it and have it be a blessing to me and to my family is going to continue to be the case because guess what? It's mine.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
Now, it's interesting. So now, how do you guys deal with sometimes? Because I imagine once again having both having the kind of the political diaspora in your organization. How do you deal with situations where you have people who their politics may be one direction, but the people that they're supporting, and when it comes to gun rights, go the opposite direction. How do you guys walk that? How do you guys walk that line and deal with those particular situations?
So that's actually a fairly common situation that we deal with because, once again, we're not a liberal organization, we're not a conservative organization, we're a Second Amendment organization. But we have to take seriously the fact that we're not just a Second Amendment organization, we're an African American Second Amendment organization, which means something in particular. We need to make sure that our advocacy is in line with and supportive of the African American community. Now, supporting the Second Amendment, absolutely, that puts us in line with supporting the African American community and its rights. But as you know, there are no such thing as a perfect politician. And while you may agree with one politician on one set of issues, there may be a whole nother set of issues that you don't agree with them with. So what we say as a people, you have to look at what are the issues that are most important to you, and then you have to make your voting decisions on based on that. Because you're never going to get a politician that has just everything you want. You have to pick and choose, prioritize. And we don't tell our members how to make those prioritizations, but we do make sure that we address it. Hey, you are going to have to make those priorities. And even if you find a politician that say is really good on gun rights and supports those, there may be other issues that they aren't good on. But that gets into the political advocacy piece, because we should all be advocates for our issues and advocates for our community. So if you see it as important, just as you advocate for issues of Second Amendment, then you should organize with other like-minded individuals to advocate for those other policy pieces.
Exactly. I advocate passionately with people that I agree with on gun rights. We advocate and we work together. And there are things where we disagree and we advocate passionately separately. And that's important. One of the ways I think in which it can be really effective, an organization like yours, is there are individuals who will listen to an African-American organization that is nonpartisan, that actually contains some people that actually support them on other issues, but it opens the door to have some of these politicians actually listen and hear, because there are a lot of people who are voting against our gun rights who don't really believe that. They just believe this is where I have to fit because my party says this is where I need to be if I want to continue to be a part of that party. But when they know that there are other people in the party who believe what they believe, it frees them up to be able to vote, or at least to advocate, or at least be open-minded enough to take a look at the other side of the issue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so getting to that point, I think really anyone that puts themselves in a box of, hey, either I'm a liberal or I'm a conservative, I think you're really selling yourself short, because I don't know of anyone, there's no one that I know that identifies as either of those labels where all of their views fit into that neat box of either platform. There's always something that falls outside of it. Normally, there are a few things that fall outside of those platforms. And so really, to me, that makes you more of a independent. Now, you may lean maybe more to the left or right, but you're still an independent, which means, okay, you need to get involved with making sure that those policies that you support and that you feel are supportive of your community are being pushed forward. So say you're voting for a politician that say maybe they, everything you agree with everything they're for, except for their gun stance. Well, guess what? You need to be telling that politician, hey, this is not working for me. And it's not working for this other group of like-minded individuals where, hey, we may like your other stances, but, you're not good on gun rights for us. It's not working for us. So you need to make that change, or you could possibly lose our vote. And you're also possibly losing votes of other people that would support you if you had good gun rights. Maybe that's the one thing they say, hey, you know what? I like everything about them, but they don't have my gun rights in mind. Hey, I'm sorry, I can't vote for them. I don't care if the other 9 things that I love they're for, but they're against gun rights. Sorry, no, I can't do it. And I've ran into many people on both sides of the spectrums that feel that way.
And I'll tell you something. This is something that's really important. And I've always said this. Gun rights aside, I've always said one of the biggest issues that we have in the Black community is that we are so overwhelmingly in one party that neither party really takes us seriously. Republicans don't believe that Black folks will vote for them, and Democrats believe that Republicans or that Black folks will always vote for them. So they tend to, in both cases, take our vote for granted. Instead of saying, okay, let's look at the issues, and these are how my issues are prioritized. And if you support these issues, and voting for people based on where they stand on those issues, I just think too often, we wind up not basing it on the issues, but we say, okay, well, this is the party, and so I'm going to vote for the person who's part of this party. And I think we need to, in particular, as a people, we need to individually make those decisions based on the issues that are impacting our communities.
Absolutely. Because you can look in both parties and you can find politicians that aren't principled. So they may claim they're a Democrat or Republican, but when you look at their policy stance, it's like, wait, that doesn't even line up with the platform or the party that you're saying that you're a part of. So what do you really stand for? And that's why people need to really take a close look at their politicians and look at the policies that they're pushing. Don't look at the label so much, what they call themselves. Look at the policies. Are those policies good for you? Are they good for your community?
Right.
And when it comes to gun rights, you have to look at specifically what are their policies on guns? Why do they have those policies? And challenge them. Try to meet up with them. Try to write letters, emails, especially at your local level. You'll get a far better response there than you will at anyone that's in Washington or at the federal level, because they're so far removed from the local people
Right.
in your particular state or community.
No, dude, totally, totally. Now, talking about policies, and one of the things that we've talked about here at FPC a lot is, there's this push away from the war on drugs, but they've replaced it with this war on guns. And in many cases, the policies that they're implementing are not policies where they're going to be going out to people and enforcing them. It's largely going to be, as they encounter people who own firearms that may be in violation of the law, that's when they're enforcing them. And so, we know statistic after statistic will show you young black and brown men are more likely to have run-ins with law enforcement. Therefore, they're the ones that are primarily against whom these laws are going to be enforced. And so one of the biggest challenges I have with a lot of these laws are, like, literally it is the new war on drugs, and it's going to wind up disproportionately impacting communities that largely are the constituency of the Democratic Party.
Correct. And so if you and it's funny how you bring up that war on drugs piece, because really war on drugs, it segued very nicely into that war on guns. And here's how, particularly for the African American community, you have so many people that have gotten overcharged for drug possession crimes. Now, we're in a country and we've agreed so far that, okay, having drugs and using drugs is a crime. That's fine. But there's a difference between putting someone in jail for, a nonviolent crime and having them serve, 5-10 years for it. And then you have violent criminal actors that serve less time than someone that had, just a simple drug possession crime. Now, I don't think that's really serving the public trust. I don't think that is really beneficial to the community as a whole. And you see, that has taken away the rights of many, many, many African Americans, particularly African American men, taking away their right to bear arms, along with other rights. They lose their right to vote in a lot of cases. They lose their right to use a lot of government services that we take for granted, whether we're talking about loans for, school, or to make a down payment on a house, or if we're talking about obtaining a certain type of business license, or professional license, so that you can, work for a company or even work for yourself. Once you get that felony charge, you're rendered a second-class citizen, which includes losing those gun rights. So you had this massive sweep of these drug laws that took the gun rights away from, large segments of the Black community, large segments of the brown community. And now you have this, we're going to restrict gun rights even more. And just has these disproportionate effect on the African American community.
And it's so complicated that, I mean, I do this for a living, and I find it hard to follow all of the various different laws in all of the various different states in order to make sure that I'm in compliance. Imagine if you're just John Q. Citizen trying to protect yourself in your community or in your neighborhood.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen cases like the young African American woman who was driving, I believe was in New Jersey, and she was just passing through the area. She was pulled over by the state patrol officer, and then she goes to jail for just, she wasn't a danger to society. She was licensed. She just happened to be in an area where it said her license was not recognized.
Well,
it wasn't that she was doing anything.
No, not only that, she had ammunition that was illegal for her to have in her possession in that state. And who would have known that? Even if she had the firearm completely put away and locked away it was supposed to be, the ammunition that she had was illegal in that particular state. I mean, that's the sort of stuff that people are getting busted with.
Right. And those type of laws, they aren't really serving any type of public safety issue. I believe that she had some type of hollow point rounds in her firearm. Well, anyone that knows anything about ballistics knows that hollow point rounds are designed to stop in the initial target that you shoot them into. So say that you have to get engaged in a self-defense shooting. Hollow points are designed that they only go into the bad guy assuming that you have,
That you hit
followed
the
that
bad guy.
safety rule,
Right.
right. You hit them
Hmm.
and you didn't, you were aware of what was in front and
Right.
behind your target and what
Right.
was around it. So you didn't hit anybody else. So you put your rounds where they're supposed to be in the bad guy, and then they didn't go out of them. The full metal jacket rounds, in which are legal in that particular state, they would more likely go through the bad guy and potentially hit some innocent bystander that didn't need to get shot or hurt in any way.
Right.
So that's not really making anyone more safe. You're actually making people less safe if they have to defend themselves against some type of violent criminal actor. It's ridiculous.
It is beyond ridiculous, and that's it's in large part because you have people who are passing laws who don't understand firearms. They don't understand firearm technology, and they don't understand how that technology and firearm laws and culture intersect with policy. And in many cases, they don't care to take the time to get to know, to get to know and to understand it. And so they come up with stuff that they call quote unquote common sense gun regulations. Well, they're only common sense to people who know absolutely nothing about guns. And
Absolutely.
it is one of the most infuriating things when it comes to trying to advocate with policymakers who just are not interested in educating themselves. Um, so
Right.
what are some of the programs? What are some of the things that your organization does on a regular basis, monthly or events or things like that you guys host?
So, like I said, we have over 70 chapters across the country, and all of those chapters have different events during the month. We normally have a general meeting where that's sort of our open, come one, come all, see what our organization is about, see what we do type of meeting. We organize various shooting events with indoor and outdoor ranges. We compete in different circuits. We have chapters that will compete with the Glock Sports Shooting Foundation, that will compete with IDPA, USPSA, etc. We have a program of a new members orientation, which we require all of our new members to take, where we talk about one, firearm safety, two, the history of the organization, and three, the history of the Black tradition of arms in this country, which I think is the most critical point, so that we can really imprint the importance of the Second Amendment to the African American community, what it has been, the importance of it, and what it is, the importance of it now. We also have a women's initiative because 60% of our membership are Black women. So we make sure that we have a place for them to go so they can learn about firearms and feel comfortable. We have women instructors and leaders within the organization that lead those initiatives. We have youth outreach that we're working on as well, so that we're trying to go to schools and talk about firearm safety as well. We have resources on our website. We can help point people in the right direction for those that, maybe they made a mistake as a kid. They got caught with that joint and they caught a felony charge, lost their Second Amendment right. Well, we have resources to point them to of how they can go about getting those rights back so that they can own a firearm. Because many of these folks have, they live productive lives afterwards, have,
Hmm.
families, have good
Yeah.
jobs, never have had any run in with the law since. But that one mistake, has cost them a right for life.
Hmm.
So we link them up with resources so that they're able to start that process of getting back that most important right.
Excellent. So, how do people find out more about your organization and follow the work that you guys are doing?
Sure. So they can go to our website, www.naaga.co. They can also check us out on Facebook. National African American Gun Association is our Facebook page. And, we post many good articles there. You can reach out to the organization, any questions that you may have as far as, where's the chapter nearest you. There's plenty of information on our website, including we have a listing of different articles, scholarly works, and books on the Black tradition of arms if you're interested, as well as a listing of the contact information for our chapters across the country.
Excellent. Sir, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll look forward to having you on in the future, hopefully as gun rights are expanded in these United States.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me out today, Craig. I really appreciate it.
Well, it was once again, It was a blessing having you, and thank you once again for the work, for all of the work that you do.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Well, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. We thank you guys so much for tuning in. We thank you for liking and sharing this program, telling your friends about the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are the home in the fight for civil rights. Remember, gotta use them or you're gonna lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.